In this video, we will be looking at arguments. We'll look at how to identify them and also how to construct them. Now, why are we constructing arguments? Basically, we'll be looking at major ideas and claims throughout the rest of the semester. What we're trying to do is find out what is a claim we can have confidence in. Also, if we believe a claim to be true and we got good evidence to support it, we will be able to strengthen our belief in what we discover to be true. So therefore, we're developing confidence in the claims that we'll be examining this semester. Now, what is an argument? For many people, an argument is basically two people that disagree and they're hollering at one another. Well, you can be loud when you have an argument, but that's really not what an argument is. You can also speak very softly when you have an argument. But an argument is a situation in which you have one sentence or one statement that supports or infers another statement or sentence. All right, so you have basically a claim, and this claim is going to be supported by another sentence, by some evidence. So this sentence or evidence is going to lead to, support, infer the conclusion in an argument. Now, the first sentence, the sentence that supports or provides evidence for the second sentence, we will call it a premise. All right? The sentence that's being supported, or that is your claim, which is being supported by the first sentence, is called a conclusion. So therefore, you must have a premise that leads to, supports, is the basis for your claim, which we will then call the conclusion. Let me give you some examples of an argument. An argument would not be this: Dr. Ford has gray hair. That's not an argument, that's a fact. To say Dr. Ford is old is not an argument. Again, you have two problems there. One, it is just a fact. Number two, though, is this: there's only one sentence, and you must have two sentences to have an argument. One is a premise that leads to the conclusion. Okay, now here are some examples of arguments. Dr. Ford is old. Therefore, he will die before a lot of younger people will. Hopefully that's true, okay? I hope that I die before all the young people in the college die. That does not always happen, but it is a likely claim. Therefore, I say, because Dr. Ford is old, therefore he will die before a lot of younger people will. Another argument would be this: Dr. Ford has gray hair, therefore he must be old. Now look at both of these examples. The first sentences lead to, support, infer the second sentence. The first part of this argument, Dr. Ford is old, Dr. Ford has gray hair, these are our premises. Therefore he will die sooner, or he must be old, therefore these are the sentences being supported, being inferred, and these are called then the conclusion. Now there are two types of argument. The first argument is called an inductive argument. The second kind of argument is called a deductive argument. The inductive argument is an argument in which the conclusion is probably true. Okay, so you've got evidence, it leads to a conclusion, and so therefore you have built a good case, and it is probably true. The key word here is probably. A deductive argument is one in which the premise, the first sentence, infers, leads to a 100% conclusive claim. It has been proven 100%. So inductive means probably true. Deductive means 100% true. The first sentence has proven conclusively 100% the conclusion. So let's look at two arguments and discover if they are inductive or deductive. Dr. Ford has gray hair, therefore he must probably be old. Now, the word probably there gives it away that this is inductive, because inductive arguments deal with probability. But suppose the word probably was not there. I think the argument itself would say is an inductive argument is probably true. Dr. Ford has gray hair, therefore he must be old. Okay, well, I think we can understand that's probably true. But it's not necessarily 100% true. Why? Because some young men, some young ladies, they get gray hair prematurely. So therefore, it's not 100% provable, but it's most likely true. Probably true. We would call this then an inductive argument. The second argument is this: Dr. Ford is married, therefore he has a spouse. Well, of course, that is proved 100%. He has a spouse 100%. This is the deductive argument. Why? If I do not have a spouse, then I'm not married. The fact that I'm married, and the definition of marriage is that a person has a spouse, therefore I must have a spouse. Therefore, this is a deductive argument, and I've proved my conclusion 100%. Now, why is it important that you know what kind of argument you're dealing with? If you don't know which kind of argument you're dealing with, you will most likely lose the argument. For example, many people, they are arguing inductive arguments, but they're being held to the standard that you must prove 100%. You can't do that, okay? For example, we will discuss the argument, does God exist? You cannot prove 100% that God exists. You cannot prove in this lifetime that he does not exist. You have to look at evidence, and you'll come to probability, what you believe to be probably true. Now, you're not going to change whether he exists or not, but you're dealing with arguments and you're trying to develop confidence. So if you are arguing God exists and somebody says, you did not prove it 100%, all you have to say is this: I didn't try to. I am arguing an inductive argument, and we're looking at probability. And therefore, is there a greater probability that God does exist or that he does not exist? So always know what kind of argument you're dealing with. Now, inductive arguments are to be broken down into two different categories. Again, we're looking at probability. We're looking at basically, is the argument, does it have strong probability, this inductive argument, or does it have weak probability? Strong versus weak. Okay? Good, better versus worse, less. Okay, for example, look at these two inductive arguments. If you study hard, then you will make good grades in school. That is an inductive argument because it's not proven 100%. There are some people who can study very, very hard and they still will not do good in school. For example, I did well in chemistry classes when I was at university, but not good in physics classes, and I studied hard. I just never connected with physics. So, but when it's all said and done, this is an inductive argument, and there's a good probability attached to this. If you study hard, you will probably do well in school. Not 100% provable, but strong probability. Here's the next argument. If you can speak French fluently, then you can be a hairstylist in Paris. Well, if you can speak French fluently, that just means you'll be able to speak French in Paris. That's great, that you'll be able to communicate. But that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a good hairstylist. Simply because you speak English does not mean you can go to London and automatically then be a hairstylist. There are other qualifications needed. So that would be a weak inductive argument. Now, deductive arguments are just a little bit more complicated and complex than inductive arguments. Inductive arguments, all you go is strong probability, weak probability. On the other hand, there are two kinds of deductive arguments, and we'll break these down even further in a moment. You have valid deductive arguments and invalid deductive arguments. A valid deductive argument is one in which the sentences, the premises do lead 100% to the conclusion. Okay? It's 100% provable, therefore it is a valid deductive argument. On the other hand, you have a deductive argument in which the premises do not prove 100% the conclusion. We call this an invalid deductive argument. Valid, 100% proved. Invalid, not proven 100%. Okay, let's look at these two arguments and see if they are valid or invalid. Okay. First one, all whales are mammals. That's first premise. Second premise, people are mammals. What's my conclusion? Therefore, people are whales. Now, forget whether people are whales or not. When it's all said and done, look at those two premises. Do they lead 100% to the conclusion? And the answer is no. Why? Simply because people are mammals and whales are mammals does not mean that whales and people are the same. The reason is that there are a lot more kinds of mammals than just whales. Whales are mammals. People are mammals. Um, Other animals are mammals. Dogs are mammals. So you can have different kinds of mammals and they still not be the same kind of animal. So therefore it falls apart. Mammals are bigger than whales and bigger than people. So therefore this is an invalid argument, deductive argument. Next one is this: Dr. Ford is a Smurf. All Smurfs are blue, therefore Dr. Ford is blue. Although this is not true, it is a valid argument. Just look at the statements themselves. You don't care at this point whether Dr. Ford is a Smurf or if Smurfs are blue. All you want to look at is the argument. It says Dr. Ford is a Smurf, all Smurfs are blue. Therefore, Dr. Ford is blue. That is a valid argument, all right? So when it's all said and done, if Dr. Ford is a Smurf, if all Smurfs are blue, therefore Dr. Ford is blue. This is a valid argument. We don't care yet whether or not Dr. Ford is a Smurf. We don't care about that yet. All we want to look at is at the argument itself, and it shows us that this is a valid argument. It has been proven 100% that in this argument, Dr. Ford is blue. Now, deductive arguments, though, are broken down a little bit further. When you have a deductive argument, you want to look at, is it valid or invalid? Do the premises lead 100% to the conclusion? Okay. A sound deductive argument is one in which the premises are true and they prove the conclusion 100%. So they must be valid. It must be a valid argument. The two premises must lead 100% to the conclusion, number one. But number two then is those premises must be true. If those premises are not true, then although it is a valid argument, they do lead 100% to the conclusion. If the premises are not true, then the valid is not sound. If they are true and they lead 100% to the conclusion, the result is that it's a sound argument. A sound argument, premises are true, they lead 100% to the conclusion, sound argument. Unsound argument, premises are not true, or maybe they don't, maybe they may be true, but they don't prove the conclusion 100%, is unsound. So they must be true and they must lead 100% to the conclusion. Okay, let's look at two examples of an unsound and a sound deductive argument. Let's look at the first one. All old people are wise. Jeff is old. Therefore, Jeff is a wise person. Now, this is a valid argument. It's a valid deductive argument because don't worry about if the statements are true or false, the premises are true or false. All you want to look at are the sentences themselves and do they lead 100% to the conclusion? And the answer is yes, they do. All old people are wise. Jeff is old. Therefore, Jeff is a wise person. That is 100% proven in this situation. But is it a sound argument? Yes, the two statements do lead 100% to the conclusion. But the question is, are the premises true? Jeff may be old, that's fine. The problem is all old people are wise. That's not true. There are some crazy old people, okay? Result is this may be true, but it is not definitely true, is not 100% proved. Therefore, it is not going to be a sound argument because the first statement, all old people are wise, is not necessarily true. Number two, lambs are covered with wool. Speckled face is a lamb. Therefore, speckled face has wool. Okay, this is a valid argument. Those first two statements, the premises, they lead 100% to the conclusion. But this is also a sound argument. The first one was unsound. This is sound. Because lambs are covered with wool, speckled face is a lamb, so therefore it's going to be covered with wool. So this is a sound deductive argument. Again, sound or unsound? First one, Dr. Ford is an American. All Americans speak loudly. Therefore, Dr. Ford speaks loudly. That is a valid deductive argument. Because those first two statements, the two premises, lead 100% to the conclusion. But the question is Dr. Ford an American? Yes, he is. Do all Americans speak loudly? No, they don't. When I take a roll each morning, sometimes I can barely hear some of the Americans coming to my classroom. That's not true. So although this is a valid argument, it is an unsound argument because one of the premises is false. All Americans speak loudly. Let's look at the second one. Is this sound or unsound? First, we'll find out if it is a valid deductive argument, and then find out if it is sound or unsound. Okay. First, all hurricanes rain upon the land. Conclusion, Hurricane Marco will rain upon Texas. So we're saying the first statement supports 100% the conclusion. It does not. Simply because all hurricanes rain upon land does not mean that a particular hurricane will rain upon Texas. There are other lands. How about Mississippi, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina? Okay, when it's all said and done, although all hurricanes may rain upon the land, that does not necessarily mean that a specific hurricane will rain upon Texas. Number one, so it is an unsound argument because it is an invalid argument. Number two, though, it is also going to be an unsound argument because the premise is false. Now, all hurricanes rain upon the land. They can rain upon the ocean itself. They don't have to hit land. So it's also done. This is an unsound reason for two reasons. One is the premise does not lead 100% to the conclusion. And number two is the premise itself is false. Good deal. I hope you'll remember this because we'll be using this approach, looking at these claims, arguments throughout the rest of the semester, especially as we look at the question, do right and wrong really exist? Absolutely. Or are they just a matter of opinion? Are they just figments of our imagination? How about does God exist? Does God exist? Or again, is he a figment of our imagination? These are things we'll be looking at throughout the rest of the course of the semester, and we'll be approaching these issues by developing arguments. Thank you.